Welcome to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, and we continue to bring you information you can use from a safe distance. Kansas City is really an important historic place for many, many reasons. One of those is we are the proud home of a native son, Harry Truman, who was this nation's president. And I think today, many people are so appreciative of the time that he served our country. And we are joined by someone who knows many things about Truman, and that is Kurt Graham, who's the director of the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library here in Independence, Missouri. Kurt, we're so glad to get to talk with you from safe distance.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
You all are very, very busy doing a number of things, and we'll dive into this massive renovation that you're undertaking. The first, I think, since 1957.
Well, there have been a couple of renovations since then, but the library opened in 1957 when President Truman and others cut the ribbon, and that was the launch of the library. It took him 4 years or so to build after he got out of office, but it's been around since 1957. Had its last major renovation. The exhibits we took out had been put in these early 2000s, and so it's been right at about 20 years since we've had a new fresh exhibit, and this one is a big one.
We'll get into that, but I also want to bring our viewers and listeners up to speed on what the library is and how it's operated. You're a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about how the system kind of works over presidential libraries?
Yeah, it is a somewhat complicated system. It's basically a public-private partnership. So the library is a federal agency. We're part of the National Archives and Records Administration. So I and my team are federal employees. But of course, we partner with our nonprofit 501c3, which is the Truman Library Institute. And they are, of course, a nonprofit. And so the money, for example, that we have needed to complete this renovation was by and large raised privately. We don't spend taxpayer dollars on things like exhibits and things like that. So the building was built with private dollars that President Truman raised. And then the building was turned over to the federal government to manage and run and operate, and to take care of the collections and the archives, of course, that are the bulk of what we're about. And then the museum and the exhibits are funded by our nonprofit partner, and a lot of our programming as well. So we have that really wonderful relationship with a nonprofit that can raise money for us, help us push the word out, do all that kind of thing, and hopefully draw visitors to this new wonderful exhibit.
And partnerships are so great, particularly in the nonprofit community. We thrive on those. We need those.
Oh, it's the only way to survive these days in the nonprofit world. Every presidential library from Hoover forward, all of those that are part of the National Archives system have a nonprofit foundation. Like I said, we're very fortunate to have the Truman Library Institute, a very generous board, great staff to work with. So it's a very thriving and wonderful partnership that we have.
Are there many presidential libraries that are not part of that system that you're telling us about?
Well, when we talk about the presidential library system, we're talking about the National Archives, which is basically Hoover to Obama currently. Those are all managed and overseen by the federal agency. You have other presidential sites, Boyhood Homes. Certainly, think of the Lincoln Library in Springfield. Think of Mount Vernon, Montpelier, or Monticello. These places that other presidents have, homes or historic sites or libraries and museums as well, visitor centers. Those are all private. Those are all 501c3 standalone. The Ladies Association of Mount Vernon runs that. There's the Thomas Jefferson Foundation that runs Monticello. So those are presidential sites and presidential libraries, but they're not part of the National Archives presidential library system.
What is kind of the overriding mission of the Truman Library?
Well, we are at our core an educational institution. President Truman had a vision for the library that it would be a place where especially young people could come to learn about how government works. What is the presidency? What are the three branches of government? That's a mission we take very seriously. You know, the statistics tell us today, and the surveys and polls and things suggest that more Americans can name the Three Stooges than can name the three branches of government. So, you know, and I wish that were a laugh line, but the fact of the matter is that's where we are. And so we have to take very seriously the idea that we're trying to educate the rising generation about the way, I mean, we're basically filling in the gap that, you know, civics education has been in some ways removed from our standard school curriculum in some ways. And so we are trying to fill that gap a little bit and help people understand how important this is. But the library system was founded by President Roosevelt, and he, of course, didn't have a post-presidency because he died in office. So Truman was really the first president to build a library as his post-presidential project. And the idea that Roosevelt had and that Truman continued was to have a repository, a place where their papers, their records could be kept so that the people could come and learn about their time in office and about the presidency and about how government works. The fact of the matter is, people in those days, the presidents, they owned those records personally. They could have burned them. They could have burned their papers. It wasn't until it was in late Carter administration that, and it was in the aftermath of Watergate, that the Congress decided, you know, we really need to be careful to preserve this. So the records that are now created by the presidents belong to the people of the United States. And so that is a major change with some of the newer libraries compared to our libraries. Those, we call ours a deed of gift library. Our documents all come from President Truman. He deeded them over to the people, as did Roosevelt and others. And by the way, just to clarify, Truman went back and grandfathered Hoover into the system. So there is a Hoover library, but it came on board later after the Truman Library.
That's an interesting fact. I wouldn't have known that. I'm sure you have lots of tidbits of knowledge about Truman.
Yeah.
So largely the function of the library is educational and
Right.
reaching out across a large continuum. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of things the library offers pre-COVID, and then
Yeah,
we'll
well,
talk about now what's happening.
Well, sure. Well, there's a lot of things have continued, as you can imagine, maybe in a slightly different format. But no, we run the gamut of educational opportunities from, we have a third grade program, we have a wonderful program aimed primarily at high school students, the White House Decision Center. We have all kinds of ways to engage with students. We have a teacher workshop every summer, teacher training, giving them a deep dive into the history. And then, of course, we have a big sweep of public programs, you know, for the general public, where we bring in book talks, key speakers, political leaders, journalists, authors, intellectuals, whatever you want to say. We bring in a lot of different people to talk about not just Truman, but about, you know, as I say, civics education, the government, that kind of thing. So it's a broad sweep, and I think we serve the community well in bringing those things forward, allowing people to, you know, we have people like David McCullough and Doris Kearns Goodwin and Michael Beschloss and John Meacham. I mean, these are the kinds of people that we've had come in and talk about the presidency, and that has been very helpful.
I know when my kids were young, they had a regular trip to the Truman Library.
Yeah.
And for kids who live in the suburbs, it's kind of like, oh, why do I want to go learn about some old guy who's been
Yeah.
dead for a long time? How would you respond to that?
Well, I would respond to that by saying that Harry Truman has a lot to do with the world that young people live in today. that literally the map of the world was changed by this Missouri farmer who ascended to the highest office in the land. So the fact of the matter is, there are many, many things about our society and about our government and the way it all works that we owe to Harry Truman. Maybe some of it good, maybe some of it not so good. But the fact of the matter is, the more we can know about what Truman's legacy was, he had an incredible impact. He left office with some of the lowest poll numbers in recorded history, and is now considered the fifth or sixth most important president that we've ever had. So it's an incredible story, and his importance is so clear. If you don't think Harry Truman is relevant, just pick up a newspaper, read some headlines. Everything that we are debating and talking about and worried about today, Truman had to confront in one way or another.
I think that's what's so exciting. Now, as I shared with you, I come from more of a historical background, and so convincing me is not a tough sell. You guys, like everybody else, have been in this COVID world. How has the Truman Library operated and functioned?
Mm-hmm. Well, COVID has been devastating, I think, to a lot of organizations and to a lot of people. Obviously, there's the health crisis and the losses that families and communities have had to bear that way. There's the incredible economic impact that this pandemic has had and will continue to have for quite some time. So, on the grand scale, we feel very fortunate to be able to continue both not only our renovation project, which continues apace, but also to continue a lot of our programming. And I'm very proud of our team, both at the library and the institute. We transitioned to a digital platform almost seamlessly. I mean, it was very very quick, very seamless ability to move into a digital environment, the digital domain, where we have continued having robust programs. We've had conversations with Chris Wallace, who wrote a book on Harry Truman on the summer of '45. We have Wild About Harry coming up, where we'll have General Mattis speak and receive an award, and A.J. Bain, the author, who's written 2 really fantastic books about Harry Truman. So we have really continued, I think, to offer really high quality programming, not just offering it through our website and to our members and stakeholders, but we have also participated on a lot of other formats. I mean, I've spoken at lots of different groups and clubs around the country, and so have our educators and curators and others at the library. So in some ways, it's, as much as this has been a shutdown, in some ways it's opened up some doors to us and gotten us in front of audiences that otherwise, had they not been looking for programming, they wouldn't have flown me somewhere to speak to some of these groups in Washington or New York, for example. But since everybody's just sort of beaming in via Zoom, it's fine. You don't have to have a $10,000 camera and a nice studio setup or something. You can do things like we're doing now, and that's become the norm. So in some ways, this pandemic and the attendant technologies that we have sort of democratized the field of programming, if you will. They've allowed a lot of us to have a much larger reach than we would have had we been dependent upon the sort of traditional hierarchical format.
We love to hear that glass half full attitude, because certainly we could spend hours about the things that it's prevented. Now, the library is closed to the public right now, correct?
Yes, it is. It's closed. Well, right now it's closed because of our renovation. We're not quite ready to open to the public with our new exhibits. Whether we get to do that or not will have everything to do with how COVID is doing in our community. Right now, unfortunately, it looks like those numbers are trending a little bit in the wrong direction in Kansas and Missouri and here in the metro area. Some of our counties are having a real struggle with it. But no, we are not. We've been closed for over a year. We closed in July last year. So we've been down for 14 or 15 months now during this construction, which was planned all along. In some ways, we're very fortunate that our planned closure uh, occurred during. If COVID had to happen at all, it's a good thing it didn't happen, either before or after this, because it has allowed us to. Uh, I mean, we really haven't lost any revenue or anything because we were going to be closed anyway. We had that into our plan. So it's I mean, I said it's a horrible thing. It's too bad it had to happen. If it had to happen, it's fortunate for us that it happened during our closure.
Do you have, COVID aside, which we can't control, do you have kind of an idea of when you would be reopening to the public so we can see all the new stuff?
Yeah, well, we're very excited about that. We are planning, have been planning roughly November 1st, soft opening to the public. At this point, we realized some months ago in COVID that we were not going to be able to have the ribbon cutting with the kind of VIPs that we wanted to have and the big splash that we wanted to make in that way. So that sort of event, if you will, that ribbon cutting VIP celebration has been postponed, likely take place next spring sometime. But we do want to have what we call a soft opening, which means we open and let the public in, and people can come and explore the library and see the new exhibits and test our new technologies and assess our new story. We, again, depending on COVID, our goal has been, and we're pretty much on track for this goal, right around the 1st of November to be able to open the exhibits. Now, I say that fully acknowledging that it's very much dependent upon the state of the virus in our community. So we're hopeful to be able to get open, shortly after that, but we're just going to have to see where this goes.
We're going to take a short break and we'll be
Yeah.
right back. Cares. We're having a conversation with Kurt Graham. He is the director of the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library. We were talking about renovation, and I want to know, once you are open and we can come back in, I know Harry Truman greets us at the front of the library now. There's a cool new statue, but what are we going to find inside as we explore this newly renovated library space?
Well, yeah, this is a major change for us, and it really, I mean, it was a fundamental shift in the way we calculate and roll out the visitor experience. In the past, people would park in that east parking lot of the building, if you're familiar with the building, and have to walk all the way around to the front of the building to come in through a big grand entrance, which is beautiful, which will remain. That facade, of course, has not changed. But the problem is people with, baby strollers or walkers or wheelchairs or canes or whatever, having to get around that much sidewalk in all kinds of inclement weather. This way, we've reversed the order. We've added on about a 3,000 square foot expansion to the building that has a really beautiful facade now on the east side. So when people park, they will see the building, they will see the entrance, and it's very clear what the entrance is. And so it's going to be very nice to have people come into that front entrance in this new, we call it the Grand View Hall. It's this big new entrance that is almost cathedral-like when you walk in. It's very, got a lot of vertical space, a very clear line of sight to the graves where Mr. and Mrs. Truman are buried out in our inner courtyard, which is really a wonderful part of the experience for visitors to realize that the president and first lady are buried there. And so as you come in, you will, there's a ticket counter and you buy your ticket and whatnot, and then you enter the exhibit and it will bring you all the way through the entire Truman story from beginning to end. It used to be that in the lower level, we had his early life, and then on the upper level, we had his presidential years. Now we have, because of the expansion of the building, we have added all of that into a single story. So you don't come to the presidency before you understand who this young man was and who this Missouri farmer was. You get a sense of his entire rise through local politics, through the Senate, all the way to the presidency. So the flow of information, the understanding how the story builds on itself over time, all of that is going to be much, much clearer. I'm very proud of the work of our team and the consultants that we've worked with, because I think people will come away with a much, much better sense of who this man was and why his core values were such a part of how he led the nation.
What happens to all the things that used to be there? For example, I can remember the Decision Theater and his, I believe it was 4 major decisions: recognition of Israel, desegregating the armed forces, etc.
Well, the exhibit that was there before has been completely dismantled. I mean, we went down to bare studs, new wiring, new plumbing. I mean, it's a brand new building, basically. It's a brand new exhibit completely. And it has new theaters, and it allows us an opportunity to use technology in a way that we can focus on some of Truman's big decisions that were frankly somewhat slighted in our previous iteration. One of the things people don't realize is history is alive, it's evolving. There are always new books being written, there are always new interpretations being offered. And so we've had 20 plus years now of new material about Truman being published and being understood. And so as we take visitors through this, some of the big decisions that he made, things like, you mentioned a couple of them: desegregation, the armed forces and the federal workforce, the recognition of Israel, even his experience in World War I, which was just, it was mentioned before, but not nearly to the degree. We have a whole theater dedicated to that now. We have much, much more robust treatment of the Korean War and the impact that had on Truman's popularity. The reason he left office with such low poll numbers was because of the prevailing attitudes about the Korean War. So it is going to give visitors, I think, a much more comprehensive, in-depth view of Truman as a decision maker. That's what he's known as a man who had to make tough decisions. And so he did that routinely. And we show, several of his decisions, and even some areas where he overreached and maybe didn't make the right decision. But we definitely want people to know that Truman was more than a decision maker. He was decisive, and there's an important difference. I mean, he faced a lot of tough challenges, and he had an ability to make great decisions or make decisions efficiently and quickly. And whether you're going to grow up to be president or not, the fact of the matter is we all have to learn how to make decisions. And I think that that's one thing that this new exhibit will help all visitors understand, is that being decisive and understanding how to make decisions is an important aspect of everyone's life.
Are there new additions or things the public has never seen before in terms of, I'm going to use the word tchotchkes, which is not a good description, but
Collection items.
thank you. Like the buck stops here, that,
Yeah.
iconic sign that's had on his desk.
Sure.
Are we going to see new stuff? And can you tell us anything that we might look
Well,
forward
sure. I
to?
mean, I can give you just one really great example, and it's just, wonderful how serendipitously things can come together at times. As we began the work of doing this exhibit renovation, we just came across and came into our possession two really wonderful collections, entire collections about the Korean War. So our ability to tell the story of the Korean War was just tremendously enhanced by the acquisition of these two exhibits, or these two collections, which have archival material, book material, but also, we've got a bazooka, we've got some things that we never had before. So the public is definitely going to see some new items in the collection that have never been seen before. Also, we're going to see some things viewed differently. For example, we had to decide how to handle the dropping of the bomb. You can't ignore that. That's a big decision, but you have to be careful about how to deal with it. I mean, is it something you're celebrating? Is it something that, you have to understand this was a very somber sort of moment in the history of the world when that many people were put to their death at one time. And so we have an item that's been on display before. It's the safety plug that was in the bomb that went off over Nagasaki. And we also have a gift to us from a Japanese family that the little girl, Sadako, who folded the paper cranes. She was 2 years old when the bomb went off, and she survived for 10 more years. And at the age of 12, she died of radiation-induced leukemia. And so, but before she died, she had folded over 1,000 of those paper cranes. And her brother, who was 4 at the time, came here on the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, and gave us what is believed to be one of the last paper cranes that she folded. So we will be displaying the plug that is literally the trigger of the atomic age, right next to the crane that is the symbol of peace that grew out of that horrific moment. So the trigger of the atomic age, the symbol of peace that it produced, will be together on display as a way of dealing with the end of the war. So in that sense, we have some really great ways to show some of our collection material, but we also are using a lot of new technologies. We have a projection mapping theater. We call it the rubble theater. It looks like a bombed out city when you go into it, and those surfaces then become part of the story as the projection begins. And it tells the story of the advent of the Cold War, and the map of Europe emerges from that rubble, and the story about how the Cold War got started, and how allies became on the opposite sides of things. So it's a really, I think, powerful exhibit. I think it will appeal to a lot of different learning styles. We all learn differently, different senses are involved. I think that elementary age kids, I think middle school and high school kids, I think families, I think adult learners, empty nesters, the retired crowd, whatever you want to say, everybody is going to learn something, see something unique in this exhibit.
Well, unlike maybe other organizations, you've got so many exciting things that it's just, this little thing called COVID is kind of tamping down when you can, burst out onto the scene with it. Where is the best place to connect with you all to keep up to date? I know there probably will be volunteer opportunities when we can all come back somewhere.
Yeah, we're in the process of training some docents and new volunteers right now. But when we're able to get people involved with this in that way, again, it's hard to say. But we, certainly our website, trumanlibrary.gov, and then trumanlibraryinstitute.org, the website of our nonprofit partner, both of those places will advertise, upcoming, talks and programs and things that we have coming up in the future. And certainly we have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts as well. So those can be followed both through the Institute and through the library. We try to coordinate as much of that information as possible so that people see it no matter where they come in. But we are a multifaceted organization. We're a big Truman team, and we're doing our best to keep the public informed about this really critical and important legacy, and especially right now as we're in an election season. You know, you mentioned early on in your opening comments that, you know, people sort of pine for the leadership of Harry Truman. And, you know, in my role, I'm very privileged to meet a lot of very, you know, connected and important people who come through and look at the exhibits and the museum and the documents and whatnot. And, you know, I meet people who are definitely on the right end of the spectrum and people definitely on the left end of the spectrum. And they all have a very similar take. I haven't met anybody yet who doesn't say something like, would to God we had another Harry Truman. And there is a hunger, I think, for the kind of leadership that Harry Truman represented. And that's why I always like to say it's a great time to be in the Truman business, because people appreciate the work that we do.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing, and we're very excited for the time we can come out, and maybe we'll make that journey out and we'll bring that to our audience so they can get a peek.
Would love to do an event like this with you live at the library. We've got lots of great venues there. We could do a walkthrough and show everybody what we've got going on.
We look forward to that and walking in President Truman's steps, so to speak.
Literally.
We want to thank you, and thank you for listening to Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications. We're proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. If you'd like to be a guest on Casey Cares or for underwriting opportunities to support what we're doing, please visit caseycaresonline.org. And you can spread the love and find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and on Instagram at Casey Cares Online. Thank you for listening to Casey Cares.